Hello, Cassidy Pascal here, and this is my choice book project for diverse learners over Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire by Rafe Esquith. And this is what the book looks like. For the introduction, I would like to read an essay that is in the book. It's by Janet, a former Room 56 student, and at the time that she wrote this, she was at the top of her class at Notre Dame. My heart begins to beat as the lights start to dim and the chattering of students slowly dies down from scattered mumblings to silence. The tiny room is flooded with lights, and I look out onto the stage, or classroom, I should say, to speak the opening lines of his character, Benedict. My heart starts to beat again quite rapidly as my turn approaches. The crowd laughs, and I take it as my cue to step out onto the stage. I wonder that you will still be talking, Signor Benedict. Nobody marks you. It is 6 p.m. on June 15th, 1998, and I have just started my 12th and final performance of Shakespeare's Much Ado About Nothing. I was first introduced to Shakespeare when I was 9 years old by a teacher, Rafe Esquith, who was famously known at my elementary school for directing a Shakespeare play every year. Not wanting to turn down an opportunity to be in one of his famous plays, I immediately said yes when he asked me. Now I put famous in quotes because at my elementary school, being asked to participate in a Shakespeare play was like being asked to join the cool and exclusive group in the school. The following year, I was given the opportunity to be in The Winter's Tale. All the plays were performed in our tiny classroom, room 56. And on that night of the final performance, I could only think to wish that I could stop time. I wish I could put all the feelings from that evening into a jar and carry it around with me wherever I go. Because the emotions in room 56 that night were full of delight, passion, and energy. Putting together those plays every year not only taught me about Shakespeare, but about teamwork and humility, and that when one of my fellow students was on stage, it was his turn to be in the spotlight, and not mine. I learned how to play instruments because we were incorporating pop songs into many of the scenes. I learned the value of responsibility and hard work, that if I did not have my lines memorized by a specific date, it not only hurt myself, but slowed down the rest of the production as well. Who would have thought that one can learn so much just by being in a play? I learned my most valuable lessons during those 2 years in room 56, and I treasure all of my experiences that I had in that tiny little classroom. Hobart Elementary School is located in the heart of downtown LA. As I look back into my elementary school years, I think about the horrible environment I grew up in. There were kids who didn't know how to speak English, even teachers who didn't know how to speak English. A rape or abuse case occurred at least once a week at school, and policemen were frequently seen on campus. Yet during the 5th grade, when I walked into room 56, everything changed. The world outside disappeared. Instead of gang fights and beggars, my life turned into guitar lessons, road trips, and Shakespearean characters. My fears and horrors were replaced by happiness and laughter. It became my second home, and my classmates became my second family. I did most of my growing up in room 56, and it molded me into the person I've become. No matter what else has happened anywhere in the world, all my troubles could be fixed in this safe haven. I constantly retreated to it when I had family troubles, and even today, when I am looking for a place where there's only love and joy, where anger and hatred do not exist, I still retreat to room 56. I thought that essay was very powerful in showing how big of an impact Rafe had on his students. So I think he's a good example to all of us future teachers. Overview. So I read Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire, and this book basically just shares Rafe's journey of changing the lives of his students in a bad neighborhood in LA and how he overcame a lot of the obstacles that were presented to him. Room 56 is a 5th grade and a lot of them were immigrants or children of immigrants who lived in poverty, Los Angeles. But a lot of the students that he has taught are now very successful doctors or scientists with degrees from very prestigious colleges. A little biography about Rafe. He has taught in Hobart for over 30 years, and this is one of my favorite quotes from him. If you're a great cook, cook with your students. If you love the Chronicles of Narnia, then read that to your students, even if it's not on the required reading list. I think that this really shows how above and beyond Rafe went, and really how important he thought passion would be in the classroom, because if you're sharing passion, if you're sharing what you're passionate about with your students, then they're going to learn that value of passion and what it can do for you. Trust. Trust was number one in Rafe's classroom. He constantly told his students how much he trusted them and what they were doing. And this gave his students a sense of accomplishment that they maybe were not receiving anywhere else. It helped them be more confident in their decision making and in their knowledge of certain subjects or topics. This is a quote by Rafe. Room 56 is a special place, not because of what it has, but because of what is missing. Fear. Rafe strives to create a loving environment of learners, and he creates this by totally eliminating fear. Rafe strives to create a loving environment. And that's important because the first thing we have to do is love our students, no matter what. Rafe feels fear is what holds students back from asking questions, being creative, etc. And I think I definitely agree with that. I remember as a student being afraid to ask a question because what if it was a dumb question? What if my teacher just kind of wrote it off and didn't think that I was seriously asking it? And that should never be an issue in a classroom. Your students should always feel like they can ask questions and always know that you're there for them to answer those questions as many times as they need them to be answered. I thought it was interesting because I hadn't really heard this aspect of teaching as much before about not having any fear in the classroom, because I know a lot of times people think you need to be really strict in the classroom. And this definitely opened my eyes to a whole nother approach, which I really liked. Shakespeare. So in the beginning essay, the student talks about how she did Shakespeare plays. Every year, Rafe would do a Shakespeare play with his students where they created a band, had roles, and there was lighting, and it was the whole deal. And he taught these students how to act out Shakespeare. They didn't only just understand it in writing, they acted out the words that they had learned. And English isn't even their first language, and a lot of them don't even speak English at their homes. Students have said that is one of their favorite elementary school experiences, and I definitely believe why, because I know that there's so much hard work that had to go into it, that it just was so worth it towards the end. I think this was interesting because even though I might not be able to use this specific example in my classroom, there's definitely things that I can try to do to help students understand things that are hard to comprehend, like Shakespeare. Acting it out, I'm sure, really helped his students. Art. So even though Rafe wasn't an art teacher, he went above and beyond again by integrating art into his classroom and into his lesson plans. He thought this was important because creativity is what helps us learn and use our full brain. This is one of the sections was him giving 5 essential art projects to do in your classroom, and this is one of them: Matisse cutouts. So first you'll just teach the students about Matisse and all the contributions to art in general, and then they make their own cutouts. And along with learning about shades and colors, they're also learning about creativity and how important that is and how to problem solve. Rafe says, we create for the same reason we breathe. We need to. And especially our students, that's how a lot of them are going to learn. especially a lot of diverse learners are going to respond well to art or acting out, because it's not so much of a language thing. Field trip to Washington, D.C. So yes, every year Rafe loads up his students in an airplane to go to D.C. Talk about above and beyond. His students learn so much in Washington, D.C. I mean, they're from L.A., probably never been out of L.A., and they're going to D.C. to learn about all of our country's history. And I think that's really amazing, and I don't even still understand how he pulled that off, but somehow he did. But Rafe also mentioned in the book that along with teaching them about our country's history and culture and where we came from and why we're here, he also taught them simple tasks that me and you might take for granted, like how to use a hotel car key or swiper key for the door, what loading an airplane is like, and going through security. Like I said, a lot of them have never been out of LA, so they learned a lot of good life experiences on this field trip, which I don't even know could be considered a field trip since they took an airplane across the country. So the list could go on and on. This book has so many strategies and teaching techniques that will make even the most boring topics really exciting to fifth graders, who are sometimes hard to please. And Rafe does a good job of explaining some of the things that he's used in his classroom and why they work in the book. Another thing that I thought was really interesting is that I thought the book would be filled with just like ideas of how to do lessons and how to teach certain things. And it was that too, but a lot of it was how to create a good morale and rapport in your classroom, and that you need trust and no fear and love. And I think those are the most important things. Before you can teach material, you have to have those things first. So these are some of my takeaways. Reading this book, I realized once again how important being a teacher is, and what an impact being a good teacher can have on my students. And my students are going to deserve to be taken care of, especially the diverse learners that I'll have in my classroom, whether that be someone that speaks English as a second language, or a mentally handicapped person, a dyslexic person, any of those types of diverse learners. If Rafe has been doing this for 30 years, I can definitely try to be the best teacher I can be. It's so great to read this book and see how passionate he is about the profession I'm going into. It makes me really excited to be a teacher. That's why I put be passionate always, and integrate what you're passionate about into your classroom, which I would really hope to do. And then I also came to this realization that the reality of it is I won't be this extreme about teaching. I mean, I can't take an airplane to Washington, D.C. with my students, most likely. But reading this book really opened my mind to all sorts of possibilities when it comes to teaching material, creating an environment of learners, and loving what you do. And I think that's really key. You have to love what you do in order for your students to really, they have to see that in you, that you love teaching them, and they're going to love learning from you. But even if I can be 1/8 of the teacher that Rafe was, I'll be lucky. It's nice to see such an extreme version so that I can kind of tone it down to what I would strive to be as a teacher. And that's exactly what Rafe did in this book. He inspired me to be a great teacher, and I know now the impact that it can have on students. In conclusion, I suggest everyone should read this book. I was engaged the whole time. It was so interesting, so applicable to the current day classroom, and I did not even want to put the book down. I learned a lot from his experience with his diverse learners and how he overcame the many obstacles that came with those types of learners. And I hope you enjoyed this video. And then the last page is my reference page.